Notification came at 11:47 on a Tuesday night, and I almost didn't see it. My phone was face down on the kitchen counter, charging next to the coffee maker. I'd been upstairs finishing a report for a client, a mid-sized manufacturing company in Mississauga, that had hired my firm to restructure their supply chain operations. 12-hour days were normal for me. My husband knew this. He'd always known this. It was, he used to say, with this half-smile I once found charming, what he loved most about me. I came downstairs for a glass of water. The phone lit up as I walked past. A bank alert. Unusual activity detected on your business account ending in 4471. I picked it up, stood there in my kitchen in my socks at midnight, and read the words 3 times. $240,000 had been transferred out of my operating account, the account I used to pay contractors, file taxes, handle payroll for my 2 part-time employees. Gone. Sent to a numbered company I had never heard of in my life. My husband was asleep upstairs. I want to tell you that I cried, that I sat down on the floor and shook. Maybe that would be a more sympathetic way to start this story, but what actually happened was that my mind went very quiet and very cold, and I thought, how long has this been going on? Because that's the thing about finding out someone has betrayed you. The first question is never about the thing you just discovered, it's always about everything that came before it. My name doesn't matter for the purposes of this story. What matters is that I had spent 11 years building a management consulting firm in Toronto, mostly alone, mostly on 4 hours of sleep, mostly while my husband, I'll call him my husband because that's what he still was, told people at dinner parties that he was in finance. He was. Technically, he managed a mid-level portfolio at a regional investment firm in Etobicoke. It was a decent salary. Comfortable. Nothing like what I earned, but we never talked about that, because talking about it made him quiet in a way that felt like weather changing. We had been married for 9 years. We had a daughter. She was 7, in grade 2, obsessed with marine biology and breakfast sandwiches in that specific way that 7-year-olds become obsessed with things. Her name was our private universe, and I'm going to keep it that way. What I will tell you is that in the year before that notification appeared on my phone, I had sold a significant portion of my firm's intellectual property, proprietary workflow models I had developed over a decade, to a larger consulting group based in Calgary. The deal closed at $8.3 million after taxes and legal fees. I had kept the service arm of my business running. I had invested conservatively. I had told my husband the exact number on the night the transfer cleared over take-out sushi at our kitchen table, and he had hugged me and said he was proud of me and opened a bottle of sake he'd been saving, and I had believed completely and without question that he meant it. That was 14 months before I found the bank alert. 14 months. I keep coming back to that number. I didn't wake him up that night. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop, and I started going through statements, and the further back I went, the worse it got. It hadn't started at $240,000. It had started small, a few transfers here and there in the $3,000 to $5,000 range, routed through a business account I hadn't looked at closely because my bookkeeper handled the day-to-day, and I trusted her completely. That was the first thing I realized. He had timed the larger transfers for the week she was on vacation. He knew her schedule. He'd had dinner with us enough times to know when she took her 2 weeks in July, her week at Christmas. He had been watching, planning, for at least 18 months before the deal even closed, based on what I found that night. The total, when I tallied it, was just over $380,000 across 14 months. I closed my laptop at 3 in the morning. I went upstairs. I looked at him sleeping in our bed, in our room, under the duvet I had picked out at a shop on Queen Street West, and I felt something shift in me that I don't have a good word for. Not rage. Rage is hot. This was the opposite of that. This was the feeling of understanding exactly what you're dealing with and deciding, very calmly, what you're going to do about it. I got into bed. I slept 4 hours. I woke up before him, made my daughter's lunch, drove her to school, and then I called my lawyer. My lawyer's name is irrelevant to this story, except that she is extraordinary at her job and was, in those first weeks, the most important person in my life. Her first instruction was simple. Do not confront him. Do not change your behavior. Do not move money, cancel accounts, or give any indication that you know. He's been careful, she told me. That means he has a plan for if he gets caught. You need to be more careful than he is. I asked her what that looked like. It looks like a normal Tuesday, she said. So that's what I did. I made dinner. I asked about his day. I went to his firm's holiday party in December and stood next to him while his colleagues talked about interest rates, and I smiled, and I drank sparkling water, and I thought about the forensic accountant my lawyer had referred me to, a woman in North York who had spent 20 years with the CRA before going private, who was currently doing things with spreadsheets that I did not fully understand, but trusted completely. He noticed nothing. That was its own kind of information. The thing I hadn't anticipated was his mother. She had never liked me. I understood that from the beginning and had made a kind of peace with it. The way you do with things you cannot change. She was a particular type of woman who believed her son had married beneath him, despite all available evidence to the contrary, and she made this known through small, precise comments, delivered with a pleasant expression. My cooking was interesting. My work schedule was a lot. My daughter's middle name, which I had chosen, was unusual. What I didn't know, what my lawyer's forensic accountant discovered in the second month of our investigation, was that she was involved. The numbered company the money had been transferred to? It was registered to a numbered holding company, which was registered to another company, which had a director listed as a property management firm in Oakville. My husband's mother had owned that firm until 18 months ago, when she had transferred it to a numbered entity with a different director, a name I didn't recognize, but which the forensic accountant tracked within 2 weeks to a man who had worked at my mother-in-law's property management firm for 12 years. She hadn't just known, she had set up the architecture. I sat with that for a while. There's a particular kind of grief that comes with realizing that someone has looked at you, at your work, your success, your trust, and seen only something to take. And then there's the next level of that grief, which is realizing it wasn't one person. It was a family project. I thought about Christmas dinners, about the birthday cards she'd sent my daughter, about the way she'd hugged me at our wedding with both arms and told me to take care of her son. I thought about all of that, and then I went back to work, because that's what I do. The plan, when it came together, was not dramatic. Real plans rarely are. The movies want you to believe that revenge looks like a speech or a confrontation in the rain. In my experience, it looks like documentation. My lawyer filed for divorce on a Thursday morning in March, the week after the forensic accountant's final report came back. The filing was accompanied by a civil claim for recovery of fraudulently transferred funds, all $382,000, plus interest, plus legal fees, plus damages. The claim named my husband. It also named the numbered company. It also named his mother. He found out when the process server showed up at his office. I know this because his assistant called me 40 minutes later, not knowing what was happening, just to say that my husband had left in a hurry and seemed unwell. I thanked her, said I hoped he was all right, and went back to the call I'd been on. He came home that evening. I was in the kitchen when I heard his key in the door. My daughter was at my sister-in-law's. My sister, I should say. I'd asked her to take her for the night without explaining why, and she had, because that's the kind of person my sister is. He walked into the kitchen and looked at me and said, "What did you do?" Not a question, a statement. I turned around from the counter where I was making tea. I looked at him. I thought about all of it. 11 years, $382,000, his mother's property management company, The dates he'd chosen to run, transfers while my bookkeeper was on vacation, the sake he'd opened at the kitchen table when I told him the deal had closed. I documented it, I said, all of it. He said something after that, several things. His voice got loud in a way it had never gotten loud before, and I realized I was seeing something I hadn't seen in 9 years of marriage. I was seeing what he actually was, the version of him that existed when the performance stopped. It was not a pleasant thing to see, but it was in a way clarifying. I had already moved my personal accounts. My lawyer had already secured an emergency asset preservation order on our joint holdings. His access to anything connected to my business had been revoked at 9 o'clock that morning. I told him very calmly that I thought he should leave. He did not leave calmly, but he left. The civil case took 11 months. I won't walk you through all of it. The discovery process, the depositions, the day his lawyer tried to argue that the transfers had been business loans that were somehow never documented, never discussed, and never repaid. The forensic accountant was on the stand for 4 hours. She was magnificent. The judge awarded full recovery of the transferred funds plus costs. The numbered company was dissolved. My mother-in-law's connection to the scheme was referred to the Ontario Securities Commission and the CRA for further review. Those processes are still ongoing, as far as I know. My husband negotiated a settlement on the criminal fraud referral that kept him out of prison, but cost him almost everything he had, including his job at the firm. The divorce was finalized in November. Our daughter's primary residence is with me. He has access every other weekend, supervised for the first 6 months per the court's recommendation. My bookkeeper, who had nothing to do with any of this, who I trust completely, now has 2 weeks in July and 2 weeks in August, and I personally review the accounts every Friday, regardless of who is on vacation. I want to say something about the part that people don't talk about, which is the period after the dramatic part ends. Everyone wants to know about the confrontation, the filing, the courtroom, and I understand why. Those are the moments where something happens, where the story moves. But the part that actually changed me was the long middle. The 5 months between finding the bank alert and filing for divorce, during which I made dinner and smiled at holiday parties and put my daughter to bed and lived every single day, next to a person I knew had been slowly dismantling my financial life for over a year. People asked me how I did it, how I kept it together, how I didn't say something. The honest answer is that I thought about my daughter every time I wanted to say something. I thought about the difference between making myself feel better in one specific moment and actually protecting what I had built. Those are not the same thing, and I had spent 11 years learning to tell the difference. I also thought, if I'm being completely honest, about the safe. He had opened that safe with such ease. No hesitation, no flicker of anything, just smooth, practiced warmth. And I had sat across the table from him and felt genuinely happy, and I thought, he has been doing this for a long time. He is very good at it. The only way to beat someone who is very good at something is to be better and quieter for longer. So I was. There's one more thing I want to tell you, because I think it matters. About 6 weeks after the divorce was finalized, I was at a coffee shop in Rosedale, working on a proposal for a new client, and I ran into a woman I'd known slightly through my mother-in-law, someone who had been at a few of the same dinner parties over the years. She stopped at my table and asked how I was, with the careful tone of someone who has heard things and isn't sure what to say. I told her I was well, she said, and I could tell she wasn't trying to be unkind, just thinking out loud. I always wondered how you two made it work, with you being so driven. Some men find that difficult. I looked at her. I thought about everything I could say. Some men do, I said. Fortunately, I'm not married to one anymore. She laughed a little uncertainly. I went back to my proposal. I thought about it on the drive home, the way women are still expected to manage not just their own success, but the feelings of the people around them about their success. The way driven is offered as an explanation, almost an apology, for why someone might want to steal from you. My firm's revenue this year is the highest it has ever been. I hired a third full-time employee in September. My daughter recently announced she wants to be an oceanographer, and she is absolutely going to be one. Every Friday, I review the accounts. I make my tea. I look out the window at the street outside my house. My house, in my name, purchased with the proceeds of work I did. And I think about the version of me who almost didn't check her phone that Tuesday night. I'm glad she did. The hardest part wasn't the courtroom. It wasn't even those 5 months of silence. Making dinner, asking about his day, sitting next to him at his firm's holiday party, while a forensic accountant in North York was quietly dismantling everything he'd tried to hide. The hardest part was the moment at the kitchen table when he'd opened that safe, and I'd felt genuinely happy, and I hadn't known yet that the happiness was built on something hollow. I think about cause and effect a lot now, not in any mystical sense, just the plain, practical reality that every choice accumulates. His choices accumulated too. 18 months of careful transfers, timed to my bookkeeper's vacation schedule, routed through his mother's numbered companies. He had been precise and patient and, in his own way, very disciplined. The problem was that all of that discipline was pointed in the wrong direction. He built something elaborate, and he built it on taking. And the thing about structures built on taking is that they require constant maintenance, constant concealment, constant performance. You can only keep that up for so long before the weight of it shows somewhere. What I learned, what I'm still learning honestly, is that integrity isn't just a moral position. It's structural, it's load-bearing. The reason I could sit across from him for 5 months without cracking wasn't because I'm cold or unusually composed. It was because I had nothing to hide. My side of the ledger was clean, and when you're not managing a lie, you have an enormous amount of cognitive space freed up for other things, like building a case. I've also thought a lot about what it actually takes to protect yourself and the people you love. Not in a reactive, panicked way, but in a clear-eyed, methodical way. There's a kind of intelligence that isn't about being the smartest person in the room. It's about being honest with yourself, about what you're actually looking at, even when it's something you don't want to see. That Tuesday night, at midnight, in my socks on the kitchen floor, I could have found a reason to dismiss the alert. People find reasons all the time. I chose not to. That choice, that willingness to look clearly at an uncomfortable truth, is what everything else depended on. And then there's the simple, unglamorous question of endurance. 5 months is a long time to hold something like that inside. There were evenings when I was so tired I almost said something just to be done with it. What kept me going was my daughter, not in an abstract way, but concretely. Her lunch in the morning, her marine biology books on the coffee table, the specific shape of her laugh. She needed me to be strategic, not satisfying. She needed me to finish what I started. He made his choices. They caught up with him, not because the universe arranged it that way, but because documentation exists, and forensic accountants are very good at their jobs, and the legal system, slowly and imperfectly, does sometimes work. I made my choices too. I'm still living inside them, and I'm glad. My daughter wants to be an oceanographer. I'm going to make sure she has every chance to become one.